Chairman Geren, would you turn your mic on where they can hear?
The substitute includes some exceptions that were in the Senate bills, hospital districts, and public health clinics. Peace officers commissioned by were already affected by it, but we included it just to be clear. In addition to the original substitute, states entities could not prohibit or discourage officers from checking immigration detainer requests. There were concerns this language was too vague, so I worked with the Attorney General's office to come up with new language that removes the term discourage and now states that an entity cannot have a pattern and practice of prohibiting officers from enforcing detainer requests. This raises the bar on what the state must prove, and existing other laws use the term pattern or practice to show an entity has an unwritten policy that would violate the law if it were written. This allows a defense for an entity acting in good faith, but if the entity has a pattern and practice of violating, committee substitute of Senate Bill 4 is not operating in good faith. The new substitute also narrows the scope of when an officer can inquire about immigration status. It requires that the person be arrested. The substitute also addresses a drafting error in the previous version that left out religion in the discrimination section, so we put that back in. The substitute requires that an arrested person be informed by law enforcement if the individual has a detainer request issued against them, and I've included language to address those concerns. Another change to the substitute clarifies that if a local entity is sued, they've detained the wrong person, and they've held them for the 2 days because the state said they have to, and they're sued, that the state has to take over the defense for that local entity and pay for all the costs. The Attorney General's office will do it. I've also worked with members to clean up the language under the surety bond section. Currently, there are issues with some bail bondsmen who, when asked to bail someone out of jail, will then call the jail to find out if there's a detainer request issued against them. And if there is, the bondsman will demand all or most of the bond money up front, knowing the individual will be picked up by federal officers, but then keeps all the money and absolves himself of liability because the inmate was transferred into federal custody. The purpose of this section is simply to prevent this bad practice from continuing, and we worked with the bondsman and several members to get that language. And finally, as mentioned in the original layout of the bill, one of the major enforcement mechanisms is the ability to charge a sheriff, constables, and police chiefs with Class A or anyone operating a jail a Class A misdemeanor for refusing to comply with immigration detainer requests. By implementing this, we'll be able to remove these individuals from office for not complying with the provisions of the bill, and also by targeting those solely responsible for not complying with detainer requests. There's no need for removal of state grant funds, and as we've seen, this money goes beyond just targeting the jail. It affects other things as veterans programs and things like that. So I believe that this committee substitute for Senate Bill 4 addresses a lot of the concerns that people have, plus it puts teeth in there where we can, with a Class A misdemeanor, peace officer would lose their bond and therefore not be able to function as a police officer any longer, and they'd also face jail time for not honoring the federal request. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Representative Rodriguez.
Just a quick one. The campus police provision is still intact? It's still in place?
Campus police provision is still intact, and we're working with the University of Texas Chief of Police to come up with a little bit different language, but the campus police will be affected with that even by the other. They just may not be. We'll probably just go to local.
Just right for local consent.
That'd be a really good place for it. And Ms. T assured me it wouldn't be any amendment.
I can talk for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
No problem.
I know that.
Thank you, Chairman.
But yeah, I anticipate there to be several amendments.
Members, any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And then we just start saying that, now the clerk will call the roll.
Okay, now the clerk will call the roll.
Cook,
Aye.
Giddings, Craddock, Farrar, Geren,
Aye.
Gann, King, Kemple, Meyer, Olivera, Patty, Rodriguez,
No.
Smithy.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank Ms. Barcelona for working so closely with us to get this thing out as many times as we've had to do it. She's been very helpful.
Thank you.
She has. 7 ayes, 4,
No, 5.
5 noes, and 1 absent. Motion prevails.